sharing their experience from tech leaders to tech leaders. This is CTO Talks.
Hello, my name is Marcin Błonowski and this is CTO Talks. I'm delighted to host today Bartek Łukasik, the Director of Engineering at CyberVadis. And the reason we're having this conversation today is because CyberVadis is one of very few companies that are trying to apply functional programming all over the place. And as it's not a very common decision, I thought it would be great to understand the reasons that led Bartek and his company to this kind of decision, as well as any problems and advantages of applying it so vastly. Hello, Bartek.
Hello, Marcin. Thank you for having me.
All right, Bartek. So for our listeners, I think it's since we are trying to share experiences and our listeners to understand whether your case applies to them, I'm always trying to bring some context to life. So could you tell us a few words about CyberVadis as a company, what it is, what is its core business?
Sure. So CyberVadis is a company that is basically helping other companies in rating cyber security posture. And we are doing two main things, or we are focused on two main areas. So one area is helping to understand if one specific company has the right security, right procedures in place, and so we're like helping individual small companies or medium-sized companies to have better understanding about themselves. And the second goal or our second focus is to actually help a very big companies that are working or cooperating with large numbers of vendors, suppliers that are delivering some kind of services to them. And what we do for those big companies is actually delivering a methodology to rate those suppliers, those vendors in a common way that they can compare what is happening in those suppliers and vendors, and then they can manage risk, and then they can have a dialogue on improving security, or even in some cases they can like break a cooperation model with them because they could be a risk for the bigger companies.
Okay, and in terms of, I assume CyberVadis is a technological company, right? So you're strongly backed up by technology. Like, how do you provide your services in terms of, is it like a SaaS-based application, or it's like a...
Yeah, it's a web-based platform, SaaS platform. It's I mean, this is like, from technology standpoint of view, it's actually it's not even one platform. There are many smaller platforms, many smaller applications, but they all have a web interface. So how our customers are using our services, they're actually logging into the platform and can work with data, with assessments, with different parts of the process that we will already implemented for our customers. Yeah.
All right. And in terms of the company size, like the company size and also the engineering team size, because I think this is also quite relevant.
Okay, so here a little bit of context I think is important. So CyberVadis has more or less six and a half year old. We started very small. Right now we are about, the company size is about 100 employees in many different locations all over the world. We have an engineering team which started as a few people, and now it's 20 something, like fluctuating a little bit. So it's more or less 5 smaller feature teams that are delivering different parts of the platform, and that they're also maintaining what we already have.
Okay. And in terms, so maybe it's not relevant for the topic in terms of functional programming, but what is the tech stack that you're using?
So we are using .NET for backend services. We are heavily invested in Microsoft Cloud, Microsoft Azure. And for frontend, we are using SPA frameworks, mainly Angular and React. So that's it. it's a super simplification of what we already have, but that's
Okay. But .NET and functional means F#, yes?
Yes. But so when we are talking about functional programming and F#, so what I would like to say is that we didn't want to go to F#. We wanted to be functional, so this was more important for us than choosing the language. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's dig to the main topic. What were actually the reasons that you decided to go with the whole application, all the services being written in a functional manner?
Okay, so again, a little bit of history. So CyberVadis started as a C# company. I mean, the backend was written in C# and in microservices architecture from day one. That was the idea, and we didn't started from F# like day one. It actually took around 2.5-3 years for us to execute the decision. We thought about it
to execute or so
to start writing.
Okay.
So first F# code in our repositories was written about. I would have to double check, but I think it was more or less 3 years after the company started. But obviously we didn't start to write F# code and commit it to our repositories first. We really discussed this for a few months and with different stakeholders, took into account a lot of different things that could go wrong or right before we made that decision.
So I'm guessing it must have been hard to convince probably management too, right? There are always there's always a resistance because it has many implications. So, I mean, what were the arguments used? And I assume the arguments will explain why you chose to write functional.
Sure. So actually, this wasn't the biggest problem. So one very nice thing about CyberVadis is that we have a lot of trust from management, and now I'm part of it. So I also try to keep the same attitude towards the developers that are working for CyberVadis. So the management wasn't questioning the decision. We were questioning the decision ourselves. So it's. There are different aspects of what could go wrong, first of all, and I mean, developers are mostly focused on code, so they are thinking in code terms. But for us, things like, for example, future hiring was super important. We'll be able to get the talent from the market to have people writing in F#. We started started writing functional code without anyone with huge commercial experience. So it was a very, it was a risky decision.
Brave or risky? Yeah,
brave or risky, yes. We are preparing ourselves, reading books, watching different YouTube channels or taking courses on the topic before we started. So we prepared really well, I think. But still.
Still why?
Still risky. Yes. So why? It started because we wanted to try something new. It's like we wanted to make a next step in our developers' career. But obviously that's not enough, right? So
it's like when the developers try to get all of the new tools and frameworks.
Exactly. So that it started like a passion for development and as a direction that maybe you can be better at your craft. But obviously to execute this kind of decision on a company level, that's not enough.
To back this up.
Yeah.
Because it's an investment, especially if you started with C#. So it's a replatforming or rewriting the existing code.
Yes. But this was pretty important. It was really pretty important to see. And back then, I think we were in the engineering about there were like 10-12 people writing code. So what was important in this this first stage is to see if really people are passionate about it. Because if we want to switch to something new, we wanted to have like a confirmation that people will make the extra effort to learn about functional programming, to read those books, to see those videos, or to take those courses.
So not only you needed to convince management, but also
and
developers.
Yes, so I'm pretty sure that it would be much harder in a bigger organization. So one of those things that if I was part of a bigger organization, one of the for me the most important things is to really have people that are actually writing this code in the language. They have to believe that this is the best idea or good idea for them to do it. So like convincing management without convincing people that are using the tool, it doesn't make sense at all. So we needed this initial phase. It was very successful. We seen the passion, we seen people learning, and in that learning we were able to build up our case of actually doing the whole organization switch. So we started with a POC on people, on people behavior. Then we built a POC of code, part of the code, and then we had a strong case on convincing that this is the right direction for years to come.
But what arguments? I'm sorry, I'm so pushy, but I need to get to those arguments that you used to convince everyone, yeah?
Mm-hmm. So for me, like starting from coding, so the main advantage of functional programming is that this way of writing code actually allows you to write less code which is easier to understand with much less bugs. It's just this is the what is appealing for developers, that you are writing. You don't have to write things that are are boilerplate for what you are trying to express with the code.
I'm sorry, but is it really like easier to understand? For instance, like, recursion versus loops. Mm-hmm. I mean, loops are much more natural to people to understand, to software developers, or they aren't. I don't know.
It's hard to say, because most developers are starting the learning process from loops. So
yes.
I'm very
it's
curious.
Like lesson 1.
Yeah,
for loop.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very curious what would happen if the lesson 1 was recursion. Mm-hmm. And if you want to do something multiple times, you have to call yourself to do it multiple times, right? So you can say that in our context of software developers and their skills and the teaching path they took, yeah, it's probably harder to take the first step. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that functional programming is just easier, because there is less moving parts. You don't have to. There are some concepts that you are not used to when because you probably the developer, you were writing some kind of a object-oriented code or procedural code. So there are some new things for you to learn, but there's less of those things than are in the.
You have a few principles that if you learn to apply, then you just copy and paste.
Maybe they are more math related, so they can seem like more sophisticated and more difficult to grasp. But I don't think that's the case, and especially when you are starting, you don't have to understand the math behind the functional programming. So answering your question, the same argument that we were able to convince other developers also applied for the management part. So less code, easier to maintain, less bugs. But for management, it's not enough. It was enough for developers, but not enough for management.
So what other arguments you used to convince them?
We had a feeling, and it was it was very subjective. So we didn't do any proper, research on that. But we had a feeling that there is a lot of developers that would like to make a next step in their career path, and like comparing our career paths or our technical development, how it went, we saw that people are like usually starting with object-oriented programming, developing skills here, maybe reading clean code, starting to write code like unit tests, taking like caring about quality more and more, understanding architecture a little bit, and expanding the skills then. And after that, for us, it was natural to go to functional programming. So what we thought is that, and again, it was very subjective, but for us it was like there are probably super nerdy, very good developers that would like to make the next step. So they are already very good, but they don't have opportunity to take the next step.
Okay, so it was kind of strategy to retain the talent you had.
Yes,
as well.
But also attract very good talent to our company. But because it wasn't based on any market research, it was still very risky. Yes.
Okay, we'll get back to the stuff because I think it's probably one of the most interesting topics here. But I also know that it's not just functional programming. I know that you are trying to apply some kind of paradigm. Maybe you could tell a few words about the principles you follow.
Could you ask
domain-driven made functional?
Okay, so yes, so with functional programming, especially in F#, it's much easier to express what the business is about. And there's this famous book by Scott Vlashin that you mentioned, the domain modeling made functional. It's like a variation of DDD, but in a context of functional programming and in context of statically typed functional programming in F#. So the main thing is to capture the unmutable pure domain in code in a way that is very clear even to non-technical people to what is happening, how different types of objects are transforming to new data structures are transforming from one to another, like as they flow through the process of the company.
So you're saying that it's also something that, I don't know, a non-technical person could read the code and understand it?
Yes. So there's so little boilerplate that you can write F# code, like the domain-focused F# code, and show it to a business person and explain in 5 minutes what it's about, that they can read it. So yeah, it's tremendous help.
It sounds really great.
and we are doing this.
There used to be this concept of domain-specific languages, which were designed specifically for this, so that both like technical and non-technical people could write it and understand it at the same time. And how does it work?
So this is actually the concept. Like so I mentioned that the boilerplate in functional languages is usually much smaller than in object-oriented languages, and you can see it exactly on that example. So when you are expressing yourself, you are expressing your business domain of your company, there is so little technical words in the code that it's not clouding the picture of what we really are doing as a company, and that I think that's the main point why it's even possible to show that kind of code to a business person and explain it very
and
very
do
fast.
They understand it?
If they make the effort, not everyone wants to. But
I think it's also great because you have like also the documentation straight away, because you can document processes this way, so you don't need any UML or something like that.
I mean, visualization always help a little bit on some concepts. Especially maybe like higher level concepts when you want to see how different components are interconnected with each other, then it's you have to grasp so much code that it's better just to show some kind of diagram.
Okay, so maybe let's get back to the most interesting part about the talent and stuff. Yeah, because I think like one of the reasons that why many companies are reluctant to switch to functional programming, or they have only single components written in such a way, is the lack of such talent, people who understand functional programming, and potentially the training processes and rates too. Yeah, so actually I don't know the rates for functional programmers, but maybe you could tell us how you are coping with that. Yeah, so getting the talent, so I'm guessing you are also trying to grow, so getting the talent from the market.
Sure. So here, I already mentioned that we started with C# and with .NET, and I also mentioned that we wanted to do functional programming. So our natural choice for us was actually F# because it's still .NET. So you have the possibility interop to use anything that is in C# in F#. It's very easy to do that, and F#, F# is not like purely functional language. You still can write object-oriented code if you want. It's not that pretty. It's like the defaults are more biased towards functional programming.
Purely functional code?
We try if possible, but like even from convenience perspective, sometimes it's just easier to use something that is already on the market, and it was written in C# for C#. So we have that parts of the code, but we are often calling this code from F# directly. So why this is important in the context of your question? Because as we are in one ecosystem, we still can attract developers that are writing in C#, and the transition is pretty easy. It's not like we chose Haskell or Clojure, and which is totally
as long
different.
as they want to switch. Yeah. So from my experience, it's like many developers who started writing C# code, they are afraid that they will like lose contact with C# and they won't find any other job with this kind of experience in their CVs. And how do you deal with that, or how do you argue that maybe it's not the case?
So we had those cases too, and like in our recruitment process, we are very focused on understanding what are the expectations of the candidates. So we are sure that we are hiring people that will feel good in our company. So like in other words, you can fail recruitment to CyberVadis not because you are bad, but because we will not be able to deliver you the proper working environment. And it can be language, like can be career expectations, or technical choices that we made. So we are very careful with that, and like a lot of people are actually applying to us because we have F#. So we have tremendously more cases with people applying because we have F#, not and very few that people are saying, "What? Okay, I didn't read the job description well enough, and I didn't understand that you really have F#." Or there are cases that like people are asking, but are you really F#? Because in the company X or Y, they also said that, but they have like 100 lines of code, and no one wants
one microservice.
yeah. So we really have F# code, and we actually managed through the years after the choice was made, we managed to replace most of our C# code with F#.
There's a small thesis maybe I would like to I have personally that maybe you could confirm or not, is that because like last time I probably wrote a fully functional code was on my university. But I have a gut feeling that I think functional programming is for this passionate software engineers or craftsmen, right? Even not like coders, so you can say people who are really passionate about programming or delivering software, and they also try to grow. And maybe is this actually true, or?
I think so, yes. I mean, everyone is is individual, so
Mhm.
they have their own choices and their own paths. But yeah, I think so that like a few years ago, I think it was very similar with clean code, especially with clean code. So you could, that the developers are good because they were passionate about this specific topic. It was like in a sense, it was very popular among nerds, and not everyone was aware of it. So you knew that you are talking with someone who
With
is not
likely-minded person.
yeah, and someone who doesn't treat like software engineering only as a way of earning money, but someone who really is passionate about it and really wants to to make a next step. And I think with years, it was more and more common that this is a requirement, even for like writing quality code, let's say, is a requirement. So people started to learn solid rules, for example, and really don't really understanding them, but they just knew the
Just following
definitions.
others.
Yeah.
This is how it spreads all the new trends.
Yeah, exactly. So there were followers, but not necessarily those kind of developers that we were looking for. I think we are I hope I will not advertise this topic too much, to be honest, because for now, for us, it's very easy to find those passionate developers that they.
Because there are very few companies doing that.
Exactly. So companies don't feel that this is somehow showing the something about the people that they are hiring.
Mm-hmm. So you have a first filter already at the job ad stage.
Exactly.
And assuming someone converts from C# object-oriented programming to functional programming, is it difficult for them or from experience?
I don't think so. I mean, it takes, when you are learning new things, you have to actually learn those things to understand them.
But assuming you have 5-6 years of experience writing object-oriented code, you have certain habits, right? Like loops.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes time to switch this in your head that you need to start applying different solutions.
I think, like writing, if you know C#, you are writing for a few years in it, like just starting to write F# code, it's a matter of days, really. It's that simple to switch. But you are right, there are some habits, and maybe even the habits are stronger for people with more experience, that like you push you into direction of writing object-oriented code in F#. And I think it takes up to a few months to kill those habits, or maybe to switch your mindset to think in a little bit different way when coding. Again, individual experience can be different, but it takes a few months. It's for sure it's easier when you already have experienced coders, experienced functional coders around you that are helping you or explaining why we should do this or that. So that makes the transition easier. And there's one more thing, like that I think I mentioned this, but the defaults in F# are really focused on functional programming. So it's you don't have to fight with the language to write in functional way. You have to put a little bit of a fight to do something in an object-oriented way.
It's actually good because I come mostly from Java world, and there was a huge hype for Scala at some point, but Scala actually allowed you to do anything the way you wanted, and it was really confusing to. It wasn't enforcing any functional style.
I thought that Scala is even more object-oriented than
maybe because people write the code in this way, but it was like you had complete freedom, which was probably not the best to do the transition.
And other way, it really helps to make the transition if you can do both for at least for some period of time. So it's not that we are writing Haskell right now. I think that would be super hard for people to switch. And
how do the functional developers' rates compared to regular object-oriented? I mean, are they higher, lower, or the same?
I think they are
Salaries and-
similar. It's, rates are always difficult, and I don't have a feeling that I mean, they can be a little bit higher, but it's mostly because people with more experience are usually attracted to functional programming. So you, in a way, you can think that you have to pay more for engineers, for software developers to write functional code, but you usually, when you compare years of experience or
Yeah, exactly.
achievements, then you will see that you will have like a more experienced, more senior team, and you are paying more because the team is more senior.
And this specific type of like craftsman, which probably would be the same in.
And there's something that it's not. I mean, very good people usually know that they are very good, so they value themselves a little bit higher.
Maybe not always, but
not always.
In majority of cases. Yes.
I think this is like the some kind of trajectory. Of
Yeah.
course, there can be differences, yes, but I think so.
So it's more about the good people being more attracted to functional programming, which increases the rates, but slightly, yes. Okay, so you had your initial plan of what you could improve, but now that you had spent some time writing the system in a functional way, do you feel that you met your initial assumptions and initial goals?
Yes. So yes and no. So we thought that with functional programming we'll solve, like from technical perspective, we'll solve 3 problems related to tech debt. So we thought that we'll write better code, just like looking at the code, and I'm confident that we are actually writing better code as our organization. I hoped that we will also model business needs in a better way, and that's also true. I'm pretty convinced here that we are actually better at modeling business needs or business processes.
Can you elaborate on this? Is it more related to this approach domain modeling?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a little bit related to, I mean,
But does functional
related.
programming help doing that?
Yes, because then if you are focusing, let's say that you have to write 100 line of code, and 90% of those lines are really about your business. It's much easier to keep focus or keep track on what your business is doing than when you have like a boilerplate. Then the same 100 line of code have to be
dealing
10
with connection
ten,
posts.
yeah, exactly. So I think it's like shifting focus of people on the things that we are implementing from business perspective. So what I'm trying to say is that we have this debt that is related to bad quality code. We have this debt related to writing business features in a bad way. I mean, not reflecting the business itself, or creating business features, automating business features that are not even business features, right? We are not getting value. So I think it's helping tremendously here. But there's also the third level of tech debt. It's, for me, it's related with architecture. So it's more about how components are talking to each other, what types of components we have, how we are using our infrastructure, things like that. And I think this part, functional programming can help a little bit, but it's not like a magic tool that will help you with proper architecture.
And how do your microservices or functions communicate?
So we are using microservices. Where, as I mentioned, we are using Azure. So our microservices are mostly communicating asynchronously through service bus. There is some synchronous communication via REST endpoints between services and between our services and the SPA frontends. But I would say that the main channel of communication is service bus, so asynchronous communication with topics and queues.
Which actually gets me to another question, which I thought it would be worth asking. A few years ago, there was a huge hype for reactive programming,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a new concept. Most of it, like one of the styles was like event-driven programming, right? And like while you could have it done on the front-end side, yeah, fully event-driven with JavaScript, there was always this synchronous call to the backend. And I was wondering whether, and you could have like all the asynchronous communication in the backend. But I was wondering whether, functional programming may bring you closer to achieving this kind of reactive programming style end to end, yes? So from front end, like throughout the whole call cycle.
I think it could, but for me, like just choosing functional programming will not solve this problem for you.
Okay.
So I'm really invested in the idea that if you are using the right tool, it pushes you to work in a certain way.
Yes.
And it's the same for not only for programming but actually for anything that we do. So what I can say is that functional programming is pushing you to write quality business focused code, but it's not pushing you into writing the proper architecture for your solution as a whole.
Okay. And maybe just a side question, how do you host your functions? Or deploy? Where do you deploy them?
So we invested very heavily on being totally reliant on code when it comes to our infrastructure. So 100% of our infrastructure is written in code, in Terraform scripts mostly. We have pipelines to deploy parts of our system to our production environment. We're pretty proud of it, by the way. It helps a lot in day-to-day life. So we are mostly using app services on Azure. There are a few functions, but app services are, I would say, the core of the system.
And how would you compare, and why app services versus functions? Functions seem to be designed for this, right? But there needs to be a reason why you chose app services.
It's the legacy architecture that we had from starting with C#, I would say. We would probably consider more functions if we started from functional programming on day one. But how the solution evolved is that we have microservices already in C# on app services, and
it seemed natural.
Yeah, we didn't want to make a revolution. And I think, by the way, like revolutions and drastic replatforming that you are saying that, okay, we are only maintaining old platform and writing everything from scratch. Yeah, I think it's most of the cases it will fail.
Yeah, it's so you try to do this more smoothly.
Yeah.
Do you still have some legacy C# code?
Yeah, we still have some C# code. Yes, not that much these days, but there is some, and actually our focus with years is shifting more and more to our architectural debt, and so there are different levels of maturity for microservices architecture. We are not at the lowest, but we are definitely not at the highest. And I will not dwell on that. It's probably for a different conversation.
Yes. All right. So I mean, there's never a silver bullet or one size fits all solution. What are the problems you are facing maybe now, that you haven't initially predicted or thought of trying to apply this new approach? Or there are none?
Actually, that part, this is a difficult question because we have our share of problems, and I had them over the years.
Specifically to this decision, yeah, because
it's very hard for me to say that we had like something, some outstanding problem that we would have to say that we never thought about this or that. Sometimes something failed, but it wasn't like a recurring pattern in our system. So from that perspective, it's very hard for me to find.
And nothing was like a big thing or there was a big thing related to?
Not to functional programming. There was actually there was a series of positive surprises. For example, we started to recruiting first people saying that we have functional programming, and then we had this live examples that what kind of people are applying for our job, right? And we thought about the code quality. And by the way, we never had, but and we probably will not have manual testers. We don't have like a QA department at all.
Okay. So how do you test?
We have like different layers of automated tests and quality gates on our production pipelines or release pipelines, and that's it. If we ever have some kind of a bug or a problem in on production, what we are trying to identify is was it this covered with some layer of tests, and if not, we are fixing the problem.
So if I can dig deeper, what are the kind of tests you have?
So we are starting with unit tests for backend services. Then we have a layer of integration tests that are sometimes testing code with connection to DB, or are testing services via endpoints. So this is another layer. Then we have like a let's call them API tests. We also call them integration tests, but they are external to the specific microservices, and then we are just calling APIs sometimes in flows to see what are the results. We have unit tests on front end, by the way, also, even though we try to keep front end rather dumb, that the business logic should be on the backend side, but sometimes there are some decisions, there are some ifs that we have there. What else? We have end-to-end tests that are actually clicking through the application and checking, making screenshots if something goes wrong. Those tests are different depending on the stage of our deployment. We have quality gates. So for example, after releasing to our next stage, releasing something to a next stage, we are checking health of this thing. We are checking if slots were swapped and so on. And we have, obvious things like production monitoring with proper alerting. Also cost alerting, by the way, we were checking those things too. Very important in the cloud to be aware what the costs are.
It's not in the best interest of the cloud provider to turn it on by default.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that there's like layers of automated, and I probably skipped something. So we are testing a lot.
I have no clue. How do unit tests for functional for code look like? How are they different? I mean, in terms of mocking and
Easier. Yes, because the main thing about modeling business code in functional programming is that the essence of the business logic is pure, meaning that you don't have to or you are actually structurizing your code in a way that if you have external dependencies to different systems, even database is considered like a different system in that scenario, you are pushing those things aside, outside your boundaries of your business code. So the business code is in the center, and you are not providing any dependencies to it. So what, for example,
are you mocking them, or
you don't have to?
Okay.
I will give you an example. You have a function that is adding two numbers.
Yeah.
So in object-oriented programming, you could have a function that is taking three arguments: first number, second number, and DB connection, for example. It is super hard to test those things, because then you have to think, I don't want to actually save the test result in the database. I have to do something with this. In functional programming, you will have only those two parameters. You will have the first number and the second number. So the test is super simple. You are just pushing parameters and expecting a result, and this result is not depending on something that is magically happening on those external dependencies. So the tests are not that different when you read them. They are just simpler to read. You don't have the boilerplate code then there.
Okay. So, assuming that given the experience you already have and your team, and you were like at the beginning of the path trying to make similar decision, would you improve anything, or like from the day one? Yeah, so apply some other patterns or take some other paradigms before starting this journey?
I mean, now it's very easy for me to say because I think we weren't actually. We needed some experience and to gain some skills to write proper functional code. So I could say that now we could write better code from day one or more functional code from day one. But to be honest, I mean, it was part of the learning process. We needed our mistakes
and
to happen.
You didn't need to do any like a big shift in big change in architecture or the approach.
And that's the part that I regret. I feel that relying on a service bus or any other bus of for passing your messages, it's a little bit. It's not scaling super well. It's not a big problem for us yet, but I think if we gain. I don't know, we get larger a few times. I'm pretty sure that those small things or the things that are now working, they will be a huge bottleneck for us. I think this is for the next conversation.
All right, I think it's a great conclusion to finish with. Many thanks for joining me today, and we have two topics to cover in a separate conversation. And yeah, I mean, to me, what you said, it looks like there's like a perfect solution for everything. I didn't hear any big con of this. So I hope it was really valuable to our listeners too. And yeah, so if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment under the video or the podcast episode underneath, and we'll get Bartek to answer those. And yeah, if you like the episode, smash the like button, subscribe the channel, and thank you very much for watching, and see you next time.
Thank you for having me today. It was a pleasure talking with you, Martin. Thank you.
Sharing their experience from tech leaders to tech leaders. This is CTO Talks.